Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country, and hopefully Mr. Rain soon too. God is good all the time. Thanks for coming in and joining us in the live feed or in this replay or whatever it is you're watching. So today we are going to be talking about preparedness and building skills. And so the importance of learning something new. If you don't already know how to do certain things, then it's really important you learn how to do those things. And they can be very, very simple things. Sometimes, a lot of it doesn't mean that just because you build those skills, it doesn't mean it's something you have to do all the time. So for example, let's say you're just crazy busy. You know how to make bread from scratch. You know how to make this, you know how to make that from scratch. But you're having a crazy week or a crazy year in your life and you got to just kind of fall back to store-bought stuff. Don't feel guilty about that. I mean, you still want to look at the most healthy organic food you can find at the store, but don't feel guilty about that. Sometimes we all got to do that to a degree. However, it is important to make sure you at least know how to do this stuff. It's like, I know how to do sourdough. I know how to take my fermentation starter and make bread out of that if I can't get dry yeast. I prefer using dry yeast. Sourdough, we enjoy it to a degree, but that kind of thing. And, in the fermentation starter, I can make it so it's not real sour and I can get a really nice flavor, but it takes a while. And if I want something faster, I'm going to use yeast and regular dry yeast. But at least every so often I'll practice with these things so I can make sure I know how to do it in case I don't have access to the dry yeast. But I can make a fermentation starter of a little bit of sugar, water, and whatever herb or fruit I have on hand. It can be dried or fresh. And then I can use that to make kimchi or whatever it is I want. That's fermented, a fermented fruit juice or whatever. I've even made like a fermented herbal tea before. I made a fermented calendula soda. So let's talk about some of these skills that I recommend you learn, even if you don't want to have to use them all the time right now. At least have the know-how and get some practice in. So learning how to sew. And these, by the way, even though I'm going to start with the skills that are kind of typically more associated with women, as well as then talk about skills that are more typically associated with men, both sides need to learn how to do all of these skills. Well, I shouldn't say all of these, but at least have a basic understanding. So learning how to sew, it does not mean that you have to necessarily have a sewing machine, because you can do you can sew your own clothes by hand. Is it going to take longer? Sure. But not as long as you might think, especially as you get practice working that needle and thread. And I did do a video a while back on, some just like 3 basic hand stitches. So there was one year, a lot of you may not know if you're newer to my channel, that part of the reason I have this big room is because it was my former dance studio and martial arts studio, because I taught both, especially the dance. That's where I really got started, because I was a dancer from the time I was 5 and up. And we had put on these big shows every year, and I would design and make a good amount of the costumes, sometimes 75 to 100% of them, depending on the show. One year, my sewing machine, it was just a cheap sewing machine, decided to bite the dust, and I didn't have the money or time to worry about buying a new machine. And I still had a whole set, 12 sets of costumes. It was pants and a top, because it was for the little Russians for the Nutcracker. And I still had all those to make, and I did them all by hand. And I was thinking, this is going to take me forever, because I had to make a dozen sets. And I was surprised at how fast it went. And that wasn't the first year that had to happen. I had to do that. There was another year I had to do that with something else, another set of costumes. So having the basic skills to sew by hand and not depend on my sewing machine was definitely a good thing. And obviously, if you're looking at more off-grid, not having to worry about having power, sewing by hand is important. I mean, you can patch things, you can stitch up holes. There's so much you can do. And then looking at having, going up the next step, I recommend it's going to be an investment, getting yourself a treadle machine, because then you can get a lot done with a treadle machine without any power. When I bought that, because my other sewing machine, again, was it seems like I'd go through sewing machines like every couple of years, because all the costumes and all the sequins and everything, it was so hard on it. I was using this one for making costumes and denim quilts and all kinds of stuff, and it has held up beautifully. No issues with it, other than needing a cleaning every so often that Patrick typically will do. So I bought the treadle machine from Amazon back in 2013. The table, I was blessed to have been gifted with that years ago, long before I even had a treadle machine, by my mother-in-law, because she didn't need it anymore. So now I was so glad it was actually a treadle table, because that's where the biggest expense is getting yourself the treadle table. If you buy one brand new, like through Lehman's, it can be pretty expensive. I don't remember what the cost is, but a lot of times you can find the old ones, like this one here. It's an old Singer. You can find them on Facebook Market, sometimes garage sales. A lot of times estate sales are a good place to find them and not pay a whole lot of money for it. So maybe $100 or so. Seems like the one on Lehman's. I could be wrong, so I might be misquoting, but just in case, seems like the one I saw in there was $1,000, which I can see. All the woodwork, the metalwork, and everything that goes into it. It'd be costly to build something like that. Linda says, I wasn't too happy that my early childhood years were mostly off-grid, but really appreciate it now. Right. When you're a kid, sometimes you think, man, I really missed out on this, that, and the other thing. And then you get older and you're like, man, I'm glad I missed out on some of that stuff, because I learned things that I wouldn't have known otherwise. It builds character as well. And I'm quite the character, I'll tell you. So along with the sewing, I mentioned mending. Well, you might have noticed in the thumbnail, I had a picture of one of Patrick's sock darners and some socks that I had darned. This is before I started buying the Darn Tough and Grip 6 socks that last forever, but even over time, they can still get holes in them. Well, what if, even though they're like guaranteed for life and you can send them back and get a new pair, what if you're in a situation where that's just not possible? Learning how, and you can't run out and buy new socks. Knowing how to darn socks. It's not that hard, but a lot of people just don't really understand the basics of it. They think it's a matter of sewing the two sides together, and then they end up with a lump and they're like, oh, that's so uncomfortable. That's not how it's done. You're basically weaving a section. And by the way, if you're interested in Patrick's sock darners, we might have one over there. Every now and then he'll make several and have them on hand, but a lot of times that's something he'll make as a custom order. You can always just contact us, raincountryhomestead@gmail.com, and I'll send you the product list. I think the sock darners are in there. I actually enjoy darning socks. It's kind of a relaxing thing to do, but I do have a video on how to darn socks. You got to be able to mend clothes, your own clothes. If something happens and you get, a big hole or sleeve rips out or something, and you need to fix it because you can't afford to go buy a new whatever, or that new whatever isn't even available to get. So then moving on to this, kind of fits right in there, is I recommend learning how to either crochet or knit or both. I tried to work on knitting and I'm like, it's just not my thing. Maybe someday if I have time. I love to crochet. I love the fact that I only have to have one hook, and my other hand. I obviously use my other hand when I'm crocheting, and I have a whole series of how to crochet. I mean, knitting makes a different type of stitch that's good for certain other things. But I've made myself quite a few sweaters. I've made all kinds of baby sweaters and scarves, hats, and all that kind of stuff. And I love Afghans like crazy. I've just made a ton of Afghans. We have a bunch of Afghans around here that I made, but I've also gifted many. I've put, I don't know how many, into auctions, because it's a way I can just give back to the community, because there's a couple of different community related auctions that go on around here. And yeah, so that can be really helpful if you're needing to be able to make things to keep people warm, yourself, your family, and so on. And along with that, I do have a spinning wheel. Another thing that I have not had time to sit down and figure out how to do. It's actually for more of a flax spinning wheel, and it is antique. I figured even if I never learn how to use it, it's beautiful and I love it and it's a great piece. I love antiques anyway. So, but yeah, learn how to spin if you have access to materials needed to spin, be it wool or flax, alpaca, whatever, and then weave. So Diametra, I think that's her name. I don't know if she's in here. I think she's in Australia. I think she's from Australia. She does some really beautiful work. She has her own loom and she weaves. It doesn't mean you have to learn how to do all that stuff, but I think if you at least pick something to start with, that not only can be something you can do for yourself in hard times or for your family members, it can also be something you can use to barter with. So if somebody says, hey, I really need a hat, and can I trade you one of your lovely hats and gloves or scarves for a whole bunch of goat milk or cow milk from our own animals here? I mean, I think that's a great deal. I love being able to barter. I've bartered with my homemade skin cream, with herbs from my garden, just eggs from our chickens, for all kinds of different stuff. And so it's, having some kind of skill or way to do something, at least where you can be able to barter with somebody else that has a skill that you don't have or something that you don't have access to. That is super, super important. So, like I said, it's not that you have to learn all of these skills, just pick something that suits you. And then hopefully that can be something down the line that not only you can use for yourself, but you can use to buy other things. So one thing I do, because anybody can do this, one thing I do recommend if you haven't started doing it yet, and like I said, I'm going to say it again, anybody can do this. I know some people say, oh, my first attempts were failures. Well, then try again. Making vinegar is so easy to do. And it's so cheap to make. So as you guys, anyone who's followed me through the years, you'll know that I make all kinds of vinegar. And I make it based on what I have a lot of or what kind of scraps I'm producing. So when we had these apples coming in, I was trying to use as much as I could because I didn't want to put up a bunch this year. Next year, I probably will. I was giving a bunch away and then using it. So I was making all these apple pies and then just taking the peels and the cores and just turn it immediately into vinegar. In the summertime, I'll make vinegar out of dandelions, calendula, nasturtiums, and rosemary. Those are the ones I typically will use as my hair wash. So this is why I say learn how to make vinegar, because people are like, vinegar? What besides salad dressing, what do you use vinegar for? Well, you can use vinegar for all kinds of things. You can use vinegar to wash your hair with. That is about 95% of the time I'm washing my hair with just homemade vinegar. Well, diluted in water. Every now and then I'll use a diluted Dr. Jacobs soap, Dr. Jacobs Castile soap. I always have a link to them in my description box. I dilute it by quite a bit, like this much soap, like just a squirt of soap in an 8-ounce bottle, top it off with water, shake it really good, and I pour that over my hair. That's only if I feel like my hair is getting a little too heavy, like maybe the vinegar wash isn't, getting enough out. And maybe once a month I do that, once every 6 weeks. But most of the time, I'm just washing my hair with homemade vinegar. If your hair is dry, that's all you'll need. If you have oily hair, you may still need to use some kind of soap. But if you have dry hair like mine, all you need is homemade vinegar. And so that's one thing. You can use vinegar to wash your laundry with. If that's all you got, you can throw that, a half cup or so of vinegar into your laundry, wash your clothes with that. You can use it to wash your dishes. Are you going to get suds? No, but it'll work. You can use it to clean your floors, your counters, your windows, your mirrors. In windows, mirrors, it is best to dilute it a little bit, but I usually don't. I even have a video on all the many uses of vinegar. You can use them to make oxymills, So if you don't drink alcohol at all and you want to make some kind of medicinal extract, then make an oxymel. You can either make the extract, which is vinegar alone, or an oxymel, which is like a 50-50 blend of raw honey and vinegar, which actually makes it taste fairly decent, where a vinegar extract, especially depending on the herbs you're extracting, can be a little bit nasty. An oxymel is not too bad. The honey, and the honey is really good for you, the raw honey. But yeah, I mean, as easy as it is, that's one thing I say everybody should learn how to do that, because it is so multi-purpose and it can cover all kinds of different things. Then, of course, another one that's just an obvious one is learning how to cook and bake. I think that's something everyone should learn how to do. It doesn't mean you have to learn how to be, a fancy chef. It means learn how to do your basics. Learn what the basic ratios are. Once you understand, let's say, for example, if you're making biscuits, pancakes, cornbread, a sweet bread like an apple spice or a pumpkin bread or a zucchini bread or banana bread, you have basic ratios that stay the same all the way across the board. As far as other ingredients, that could vary depending on what you're making. Like biscuits don't typically have eggs in them, but the amount of baking powder you're going to use for that same amount of biscuits is going to be the same as you would use in pancakes or in that sweet bread or in your cookie. Well, maybe not always the cookies. Sometimes cookies have less, but I always just say, okay, that's about a tablespoon. No, a tablespoon is about this much in my hand. I can make up my own recipes because I understand the basic ratios of, if I've got 2 cups of flour, then I'm going to need about a tablespoon of baking powder for this particular recipe, whatever it is I'm making. So Patrick is coming in. So I have a chair all ready for him.
Oh, how cute.
Which is timing's pretty good because I'm about ready to get to the guy stuff. The guy stuff. Remember, this is for everybody.
Oh.
But again, the things that we typically think of, girls typically do this, guys typically do that. So anyway, the cooking and baking, just start with your basics. Start learning your basic things. Learning how to make pancakes is one of the easiest things you can do. No bumpy the table. You're making everything shake, and now everybody's going to get seasick. Okay. Obviously, start learning how to garden. You can start small, start with a few herbs in a pot. It can be inside, it can be outside. It can be simple. You don't have to go till up your whole yard, if you even have a yard, and just start putting in a garden. Start small. If that's all you can do, that's something. And then at least just growing herbs, especially herbs that are going to be good for using for medicine and for cooking, adding flavor to your food. I mean, this is what I think is great about herbs like oregano, sage, thyme, rosemary. These are all great medicinal herbs that are also great culinary herbs. So start with things like that. They're usually, for most people, pretty simple to grow, though things like rosemary in particular doesn't like our climate so well, but I've managed through the years to finally figure out a good place to grow it where it doesn't get too saturated with all our many, 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 many inches of rain. And yeah, so I've got plenty of rosemary now as a result.
Keeps the food fatigue down, huh?
Keeps the food fatigue down when you can flavor your food and make your own medicines with that homemade vinegar. Oh, I almost forgot, with the vinegar, I also recommend learning how to make your own homemade wine, because wine makes a better tasting extract. And then if you want to go a step farther, which we haven't done this yet, but you do need to either buy or make your own still, so you can make your own spirits to make your tinctures if you're wanting something stronger. And then spirits are also going to be good for other things like disinfecting wounds, disinfecting surfaces, whatever. And
even if you have a flu or something like that, maybe a little shot of whiskey every now and then is not like you're bibbing it all the time. It just kind of helps.
Right.
Helps with the throat and stuff.
It really does. If I have a really bad cough and it just won't stop, I just keep a solution that I make with whiskey or whatever alcohol. And I have a video on this too. It's basically a hot toddy concentrate. It just put a little bit in a shot glass and then just take a small sip of that and let it just sit on my throat. Another thing is making a tincture with like that. using a strong alcohol, a spirit of some sort, and then putting a spray bottle, like the elderberry tincture. That's a really good one. You can spray it in the back of your throat. So not only are you getting the medicinal benefits of whatever herbs that are in there, you're also, the spirit will numb the throat. And that's what helps really curb a cough or even a sore throat.
First of all, I owe everybody an apology. I lied to you last time I was in
He
here.
lied.
I said that I didn't have a hand plane. Well, I got to digging in the bottom of that box, and lo and behold, I found a cute little hand plane. It's just a small one.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah, but it's made out of metal. So a little Stanley. I don't know how old the thing is. It looks like it's pretty old. I just came across it.
So
anyway, what do you want me to talk about?
Well, we're just talking about. I'm just talking about like just different skills. I've already covered these, so I didn't know if there was anything in those.
Well, I don't have any skills.
Three right there. Yes, you do. Everybody knows you do. They've seen my kitchen cabinets and this lovely oak countertop.
I suppose anything that you learn how to do by yourself, for yourself, with yourself, and you can save a lot of money. Sometimes if you, just as general terms, but generally a good excuse for me to buy a tool is to tell Heidi, hey, I can make this and I can make it by myself for you. She's always, but truthfully, if you can figure out how to do it yourself, and I'm not a professional mechanic or fabricator or carpenter or woodworker, none of those things, but usually I can get things to stick together when it comes to welding. Welds might not be pretty, but they work, they're functional.
Cody,
what are you saying? What do you got? What do you have to say?
Saying hi, everybody. Hi, everybody.
We don't go to Hollywood. We don't go to Disneyland. We don't go to
Vegas.
We don't go to the Mocha stand or some of those things. So any monies that you can save, $1 here, $1 there, can add up to buy any simple tool that, you can do like me and have it sit around your shop. I guess, a lot of people are going to say, well, and that's all fine and good to have skills, but you had to have tools to do it. As far as hand tools, people aren't really looking for them anymore. So you can go to a garage sale or Facebook Marketplace or one of those other places and find people that have tools and then you learn how to use them. Again, any skill, as in carpentry, woodworking, if you get your own solar stuff, you have to be your own electrician. You have to be your own technician. When you do stuff yourself, you got to be your own plumber. Any skill that you pick up and you're trying to be more independent, the more you have to learn. You just can't get on the phone and say, hey, my widget ain't working anymore. Can you come fix it? So along with that knowledge comes the responsibility and the tools to make that happen. I guess it's kind of where I'm going. Maybe I'm scattered all over the place here, but
you're doing good.
But yeah, having skills, I think probably the most priority is, what are we looking for if we don't have power? What are we looking for in a grid down or a prepping situation? We want to be fed, we want to be warm, we want to be clothed, we want to have shelter. So how do you maintain those four things? And I just threw four things out there, but obviously there's more that tag onto that. You have to be your own nurse, your own doctor sometimes. So just if you don't know those skills, maybe you can get some literature, some hard copy books and things like that can help you learn those skills later on during that grid down situation. If you don't have the internet and you don't have the television to look at, maybe you can look at a book, and preferably we have a good basis of how to plug a hole in ourselves if we cut ourselves, and how to disinfect a wound and things like that before we go into that situation. So we have the basics down. You might have to figure out how to be a surgeon later on down the road. You know what I mean? So any general skills that you can pick up, and just basic electronics, basic battery functions and how they work and how they hook them up, how you hook them up. Simple things like oil changes and changing your own tire, and just really simple things can save you a lot of money, and it also help encourage you to be able to, well, let me see if I can change out a wheel bearing on a car. Some of those things, or a fuel pump or a starter or whatever. Some of those general things I can do, and I was never taught that. I just figured it out. Okay, well, looks like these 2 bolts on this flange have to come off, and so I'll take those off, and this wire needs to come off of here, if I'm changing a starter or something. Those things are actually pretty simple, and for somebody who doesn't know how to, anything about mechanicking skills, would look at that and it would look daunting to them. But, the thing's man-made, so you can look at that and say, I can do this. I rebuilt hydraulic pumps and different things like that, and I just carefully take them apart, look at the parts, carefully put them back together again, and sometimes they work. Well, the hydraulic pump that I rebuilt for the backhoe, it worked great. So
yeah, several people keep mentioning duct tape and grease or WD-40. So the general rule of thumb is, if it sticks and it shouldn't, WD-40. If it doesn't stick and it should, duct tape. But I also like using electrical tape for certain things too. Electrical tape works good for things that duct tape wouldn't work as good for, and vice versa. So we keep a lot of electrical tape and duct tape on hand, and various different types of lubricants, your WD-40, and then he's got his greases for that blue junk and all that other stuff. Whatever all that is.
Keeping greases, different types of greases and oils, extra filters, things like that you're going to have to change out quite frequently. Or if you get a leak or something like that, you need to be able to replace that. Antifreeze, and knowing how to sew and how to, if nothing else, how to mend what you have.
Yep.
I know how to do basic stitching and things like that. I learned that from my mom, and they actually taught that in the military. Lena had a little sewing kit with my military gear, but things like that. That'd be a good thing to put in a bug out bag or something too.
With that said, I want to add something I'm thinking about, because I don't think I've ever said this. So even though long before I met Patrick, while I was a kid, I was learning how to cook and bake, and I was pretty much teaching myself. Not that my mom didn't cook. She didn't do a lot of baking from scratch. So, and I loved homemade pies, and I loved homemade breads and things like that. So I basically had to teach myself how to do those things. But there were things that we didn't really eat, like biscuits and gravy. I was never a big fan of biscuits and gravy when I was young. And so when I met Patrick, he's like, do you know how to make, when we got married, I don't know how it came up, but biscuits and gravy came up, and I'd never made it before. I made biscuits, but I hadn't made gravy. I'm like, what kind of gravy? What do you make it out of? Well, we got in the kitchen together, and he goes, well, this is what I remember, because he used to just watch his mom in the kitchen. He goes, this is how I remember mom doing it. And so based on actually what he knew from just watching her, not even doing it himself, and then, showing me, I figured it out. And now it's like, knowing that, I can make all kinds of different gravies, especially white sauces that you can use in place of things like store-bought canned cream soups, cream of mushroom, cream of celery, cream of whatever. You can make it yourself. It's so easy and very, very cheap. So, and the principle is pretty much the same.
Being familiar, just surface wise of different skills is probably good enough for now. To be an in-depth mechanic, learning how to repair a small engine is a really good skill to have. Knowing how to identify some of the basics, keeping extra plugs on hand, starter rope. You can buy little cheap carburetors on the internet for pennies on the dollar. Carburetors or carburetor kits or priming bulbs. I got all that stuff squirreled away in the event that I need to check those things. So like on a small engine, if you don't have an engine that runs, first thing I do is if it hasn't ran for a long time, it's been sitting outside, then I go right for the sediment bowl on the carburetor. I drain that out, get any water, any gunk out of that thing. Second thing is I put that back in. I smell the gas to see if it smells bad. After a while, you kind of understand what bad gas smells like. And if it smells bad, a lot of times I'll just dump it out and put new gas in it just to get that behind me. And then the second thing I'll do is I'll pull the spark plug and put the spark plug wire on it and put the, spark plug electrode or the end of it on the ground of the head of the lawnmower, whatever it is, and pull the cord, the starter cord, and see if it has a spark. Yeah. So if you got spark and you got fuel, generally that's your big problem, and the fuels these days they don't last that long. So I like to get the non-ethanol fuel to put in like lawnmowers and small engines.
So a couple other topics that to look into is, obviously, at least maybe get some basic knowledge of, in this case, definitely having some books on hand, watching as many videos as you can, is be something like animal husbandry. If you're not to that point where you've got livestock yet, or you can't have livestock, just because you live in an apartment now doesn't mean down the road you might be in a situation where this kind of knowledge would be helpful.
Yeah, never lose hope in a goal.
Right.
Right now you might not see that end of that tunnel, but quite honestly, I never dreamt that we would be in a place that we are, and we still got a long ways to go. We have so much to learn. We've made a lot of mistakes. But
we've learned through a lot. I've
just never thought we'd ever be where we're at today. But that's because we have really put our nose to the grindstone. We haven't sat around and not pursued it. Things that I'm trying to be PC here, but
please,
you can't get anything done by not doing, is what I'm trying to say. And
we can sit around and wish we knew how to do something, or we can jump in and learn.
Right. And I'm not the best at speaking, or I'm not the best at learning. It takes me a long time to pick something up. I'm more of a hands-on kind of a guy. If you show me by doing, that's kind of where I pick up more things. I'm not much of a bookworm, but
he's a tactile learner for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, the persistence, if you have persistence and tenacity, that's going to take you a long way, with her brains and my ignorance, just getting out there and getting it done. I think that's kind of what's got us where we are. Not like I say, we're not the end all in knowledge. We're
definitely
not. Definitely. That's not what I'm trying to say. I don't want anybody to think that we're ever tooting our own horn or bragging. We're just here trying to share with you. We're learning things from you too, just like, trying to figure out what these little things are. I don't know what they are. I'd be interested in knowing, if nothing else, just curiosity. But if we learn from each other, that's why we're here. We're here to learn just like you guys are, and hopefully we can glean information from each other.
Right.
When it comes to prepping, I don't think any of us have it figured out 100%. If you stop and think of it, it's almost like a hobby in this country, anyways, in the United States. And other countries, it's a way of life. In the 30s, clear up till the 30s, it was a way of life.
Right.
Prepping was not. You didn't think of it as prepping. You just, we're just living. We're surviving. We put food up. We have a root cellar because we need it.
I like what Diametra said here is everyone is a teacher and everyone is a student. So
Right.
true, because everybody has some kind of
niche.
knowledge. Yeah, some kind of skill. I mean, I have learned so much just from my followers since I started my channel that I've been able to then incorporate into the things I do and then turn around and teach that back. And so, it really is kind of a win-win. And, when you can, and that's something too, maybe you don't have the physical ability to do some of the skills, the things that are already in your head,
Right.
because maybe you're crippled up, you're elderly, whatever it is. And one time you did do that stuff, but you still have this up here. There's a lot up here that we can tap into in the older generation, and
Right.
they are useful. We need them.
Necessary.
They are necessary. Thank you. That was a much better word. And if you're one of those people, then that is something you can do, is pass this knowledge by sharing this information with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends, at least those willing to listen.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys have ever watched the movie The Postman with Kevin Costner. It's one of those, what do you call it? Post-apocalyptic sort of movies. And I've always loved that movie. Well, there's this part where he goes up to this older guy and he can't really, I think he was crippled too. And
Or he couldn't move around very well.
He couldn't move around really well. And so he asked him, well, what do you do around here? And he's like, well, physically he didn't do much, but he had a lot of knowledge up here. Well, he ended up having to tap into that knowledge. And so it was,
he said,
I can't remember.
So what do you do? And he goes, I know stuff.
I know. That's what I know stuff. And that stuff that he knew was useful.
He was an old military guy or something like that, and all stoved up and kind of limping around. But he had knowledge. He had a lot of knowledge, and I mean that's just a good example.
And that's why I mentioned that, because I love that part in that movie where it's like, I know stuff. And he most certainly did. Some food for thought when you're thinking about skills. There's so much more that could have been covered of the types of skills. But the idea is to sort of get your mind going, get you thinking about, okay, what is something that I depend on others to do for me that maybe I could learn how to do myself? And it could be as simple as making your own mayonnaise. I was thinking about this again when one of Zach's most recent videos, when he was talking about how now they've changed the ingredients in a popular mayonnaise brand. And people are kind of freaking out. It's like, making homemade mayonnaise is super easy. And I have a video on it. And I know a lot of other people do as well. And so I haven't had to buy mayonnaise in years. I mean, the point is it's easy. It takes me like 5 minutes to make